On Sunday, February 25th, 2024, the Birmingham Police Department officers began investigating the missing persons case of 20-year-old Mahogany Jackson. Mahogany sent a text message to a family member that she had been kidnapped. Early the following day, officers and detectives discovered Mahogany's body in the 1700 block of Laurel Avenue. Investigators determined that she had been shot. With assistance from the community, detectives were not only able to locate Mahogany Jackson's body, but detectives took 7 suspects responsible for Mahogany's murder into custody within 48 hours of this.
Send the police 3 words, typed in the darkness of early morning in Birmingham, Alabama. 3 words that would be the last cry for help from a 20-year-old mother who trusted the wrong people. February 25th, 2024, Birmingham. While most of the city slept, Mahogany Jackson was fighting for her life. Not from a stranger, not from someone she'd just met, but from people she knew, people she called friends. Within hours of that text, Birmingham police would find her body on a roadside in southwest Birmingham. A single gunshot wound to the head. But that wasn't the whole story. What happened before that moment, in the hours leading up to her death, was so disturbing that seasoned Birmingham homicide detectives would later call it one of the most heinous crimes they'd ever investigated. If you've ever trusted someone who turned out to be dangerous, hit subscribe right now. Because what you're about to hear could save your life or someone you love. 8 people, all under the age of 26, all from the Birmingham area, all charged with capital murder. And here's what makes this case particularly devastating. They recorded it, not accidentally, not in the background. They actively filmed what they did to Mahogany, beating her, torturing her, humiliating her, as if her suffering was entertainment. Those videos would become the evidence that sealed their fate in Birmingham's courts. But they also became a permanent record of humanity at its absolute worst. A young mother's final hours, captured frame by people she thought she could trust. This is the story of Mahogany Jackson, a Birmingham daughter. A story about betrayal, about how quickly a familiar face can become a threat, and about a mother's desperate final plea that came too late. And if her story doesn't make you want to stay informed, to protect yourself, to learn the warning signs, then tell us why in the comments, because staying silent never saved anyone. Before she became a Birmingham headline, before her name was tied to one of the city's most brutal crimes, Mahogany Jackson was just Mahogany. A 20-year-old trying to figure out life, like so many young people do in Birmingham's neighborhoods. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She didn't have thousands of followers or a viral moment. She was a young mother navigating the messy, beautiful, overwhelming reality of raising a child in her early 20s. Family members described her as soft-spoken, gentle, the kind of person who kept her circle small, who leaned on the people she trusted in Birmingham's tight-knit communities. Her world revolved around her child, her biggest responsibility, her greatest joy. Being a mom wasn't just part of her identity, it was her identity. Mahogany grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, a city with its own rhythms, its own struggles, its own heartbeat. Like a lot of young parents in Birmingham, she relied on friends and familiar faces for support. She didn't have all the answers. She was still learning, still growing, still trying to build a life for herself and her baby. And because of that, she stayed close to people she knew. People she believed had her back. If you're watching this and you're a parent, or you have loved ones navigating friendships you're not sure about, subscribe now. Because what happened to Mahogany in Birmingham could happen anywhere. But here's the thing about trust. It's fragile. And when it breaks, it doesn't just crack, it shatters. In late February 2024, Mahogany found herself in the company of a group she thought were friends in Birmingham. Maybe some of them were, once. Maybe some of them she'd known for years. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. Disputes, grudges, the kind of petty conflicts that explode when the wrong people are involved. Court testimony in Birmingham's Jefferson County Courthouse would later reveal that a stolen gun may have been at the center of it all. A weapon, a grievance, an accusation. The details remain unclear, but the outcome was devastating. What started as a dispute in Birmingham escalated into something unthinkable. Mahogany wasn't perfect. None of us are. But she didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does. Her mother would later speak to Birmingham media about the pain of reliving those final moments in court. About visiting the site in southwest Birmingham where her daughter's life ended. About the trauma that doesn't fade with time, that only deepens with every hearing, every piece of evidence, every horrific detail revealed. Think about your own mother, your own daughter, your own sister. Could you live with yourself if you scrolled past this story and didn't learn how to protect them? Mahogany was a daughter, a mother, a young woman still finding her way in Birmingham. And in the early hours of February 25th, she realized she was in danger. But would anyone reach her in time? We don't know exactly how Mahogany ended up at that residence in Birmingham on the night of February 24th. Maybe she was invited. Maybe she thought it was just another hangout with familiar faces in a Birmingham neighborhood she knew. Maybe she had no idea what was waiting for her. What we do know is this: she was taken captive, not by strangers lurking in an alley, not by a random act of violence on Birmingham streets, but by people she knew, people in her Birmingham social circle. People who, for reasons that would later unfold in court, decided she had wronged them. The location was tied to someone she knew, a residence in Birmingham, a space that should have felt safe or at least familiar. But that night, it became a trap. Inside that Birmingham house, a group gathered. 8 people. Teenagers and young adults from the Birmingham area ranging from 19 to their mid-20s, friends, acquaintances. Maybe some were just there, pulled into the chaos by proximity or peer pressure. But all of them would later be charged by Birmingham prosecutors with her murder. As the night wore on, the situation escalated. What began as confrontation turned into captivity. Mahogany wasn't free to leave. She wasn't free to call for help. She was trapped, surrounded by people who had turned from friends into captors. If you've ever felt trapped in a situation with people you thought you could trust, you need to subscribe, because what comes next shows exactly why trusting your gut can mean the difference between life and death. And at some point during those hours in that Birmingham residence, she reached for her phone. In the darkness, in the fear, in the moments when she must have realized how serious this had become, Mahogany did the only thing she could think of. She texted her mother. "I've been kidnapped. Send the police." She even shared her location, a digital pin dropped on a map of Birmingham, a desperate trail that she hoped would lead rescuers to her before it was too late. But her captors noticed. They saw what she had done, and that changed everything. What had been violent became lethal. What had been abuse became a race to silence her before Birmingham police could arrive. The group knew the police could be on their way. They knew Mahogany had given away their Birmingham location. They knew they were running out of time, and so they made a decision. A decision that would cost Mahogany her life and shock the entire Birmingham community. But before that final fatal moment, there were hours of horror, hours that were captured on video, hours that would later be shown in Birmingham courtrooms, frame by terrible frame. What happened next would leave Birmingham detectives calling it the worst case of their careers. Are you still watching? Or are you scrolling, pretending this could never happen to someone you know? The videos tell a story that words struggle to convey. They show Mahogany in a room in Birmingham, surrounded, outnumbered, helpless. They show her being slapped, punched, stripped, humiliated in ways that no human being should ever endure. They show guns pointed at her, threats hurled at her, laughter in the background, cruel, mocking laughter, as if her pain was a performance for their entertainment. Birmingham prosecutors would later describe the footage as barbaric. Detectives who watched it in the Birmingham Police Department said it was among the worst things they'd seen in their entire careers. And these were people who had spent years working homicide cases in a major city like Birmingham, people who thought they'd seen it all. But this was different. If this makes your stomach turn, good. Subscribe so you remember to teach your kids, your friends, your loved ones how to recognize danger before it's too late. Because Birmingham won't be the last place this happens. The abuse wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a moment of rage that quickly passed. It was sustained, deliberate, recorded. 8 people from Birmingham were present at various points during the assault. Some participated directly, some watched, some filmed. But all of them were there. All of them knew what was happening, and not one of them stopped it. Court testimony in Birmingham would later reveal that 11 videos were eventually recovered by Birmingham investigators. 11 separate recordings of Mahogany's suffering, each one more disturbing than the last. In the footage, she can be seen pleading, crying, begging for mercy from people she knew in Birmingham, but mercy never came. The group forced her to perform degrading acts. They beat her repeatedly in that Birmingham residence. They threatened her with weapons. They stripped away her dignity, her autonomy, her humanity, all while cameras rolled. And here's what makes it even more incomprehensible. They seemed to enjoy it. There's something deeply disturbing about the fact that these young people from Birmingham, some of them still teenagers, thought it was acceptable to treat another human being this way. That they believed filming it was somehow a good idea. That they didn't stop even as Mahogany's suffering intensified. Think about the last time you saw something wrong and stayed quiet. Think about the last time you knew someone was in trouble and told yourself it wasn't your business. Subscribe if you never want to carry that weight. But then something shifted in that Birmingham house. At some point during the assault, someone noticed Mahogany's phone. They saw the messages. They saw the Birmingham location she'd shared with her mother. They saw the plea for police, and they panicked. The realization hit them all at once. Birmingham police could be coming. Mahogany had given them away. She'd left a trail through Birmingham's streets. She'd reached out for help. And if law enforcement showed up at that Birmingham address, they would all be caught. They would all go to prison. So they made a choice that turned assault into murder on Birmingham streets. 3 of the defendants, according to testimony that would later be presented in Birmingham's Jefferson County Courthouse, decided to take Mahogany somewhere else, somewhere remote in Birmingham, somewhere she couldn't be traced. They forced her into a vehicle. They drove her through Birmingham streets to a roadside in southwest Birmingham. They took her out of the car on that Birmingham road, and then one of them pulled the trigger. If you're not subscribed yet, ask yourself why. What's stopping you from staying informed, from protecting your community, from making sure Mahogany's death meant something?
There is more work to be done. Now today, Judge Keisha Davis gave the state an opportunity to offer each suspect a plea deal, but the death penalty remains on the table for all of those suspects. Now one defendant, Jeremiah McDowell, his attorney spoke to us stating that his client is ready for the case to move forward, and Jackson's mom says despite how hard today is, she plans to be there every step of the way.
It's rough. Every time I come here, I have a horrible night before, and I'm going to have a horrible day when I leave here today. But every time I'm going to be here.
He's anxious to get his case in front of a jury so that he can get out of jail and exonerate himself. Like I said, he's innocent, and we expect to prove that in front of the jury.
Stuff is basically whether or not the state has an offer relative to settling the case, meaning a plea offer. Obviously, at this time, we relayed to the judge that we didn't have a plea offer. And we're not at that point yet. And we also notified the court that we filed a notice to seek the death penalty on each defendant
Someone
as well.
else is. This is a case that shocks the conscious. This is not your normal case, and I'm going to go out on a limb in any state.
Mahogany Jackson's death, leaving a community shocked nearly a week later.
Mahogany's death is indicative of many other homicides that we've suffered in our city. People that know one another are choosing violence against their fellow brother and sister.
Birmingham police believe Jackson was killed by people who were acquaintances to her, but detectives working the case are grateful for the community who stepped up with information, leading them to justice.
The community stepped up immediately. You have a 20-year-old that died a horrific death, and the Birmingham Police Department was able to arrest 8 people responsible for her murder.
Police say after Jackson was kidnapped, she did what she could to try to save herself, and safety experts want to make sure everyone is aware of safety features if their own lives are at risk, even texting 911.
If you contact 911 directly, that circumvents any delay that is in the system, and 911 also has the capability of sending you a hyperlink where you can basically share your.
Mahogany Jackson died on the side of a Birmingham road, alone, in the darkness, shot in the back of the head by someone she knew. She was 20 years old. She was a Birmingham mother. She had her whole life ahead of her in this city. And in her final moments on that Birmingham roadside, she must have known. She must have realized that the people she trusted, people from her own Birmingham community, had become the people who would kill her. The shot was fatal, instant. Mahogany collapsed onto the Birmingham pavement, her life extinguished in a single brutal second. The defendants didn't stay on that Birmingham road. They didn't call for help. They didn't check to see if she was still alive. They left her there, like garbage, like she was nothing. And then they drove away through Birmingham. Her baby will never know her voice. Her mother will never stop crying. And if you think you can just watch this and forget it, you're part of the problem. Subscribe. Stay aware. Stay angry. For a few hours, Mahogany's body lay undiscovered on that Birmingham roadside. The city moved around her, Birmingham cars passing, people going about their lives, while a young mother's lifeless form remained in the street waiting to be found. It wasn't until February 26th, less than 24 hours after her desperate text, that Birmingham police located her body. The gunshot wound was obvious. The circumstances were immediately suspicious to Birmingham investigators. And as detectives from the Birmingham Police Department began their investigation, they quickly realized this wasn't a random act of violence on Birmingham streets. This was something far more complex, far more disturbing. They traced Mahogany's last known location back to the Birmingham residence she had shared with her mother. Birmingham detectives interviewed witnesses. They pulled phone records. They followed every lead, every clue, every scrap of evidence they could find across Birmingham. And then Birmingham police found the videos. The footage was still on the defendants' phones. They hadn't even tried to delete it. Maybe they thought they'd never get caught in Birmingham. Maybe they didn't realize how quickly Birmingham's justice system would close in on them. Or maybe, and this is the most disturbing possibility, they simply didn't care. The videos became the cornerstone of the Birmingham prosecution's case. They showed every defendant. They showed the sequence of events in that Birmingham house. They showed the beatings, the assaults, the threats. They showed Mahogany's suffering in excruciating detail. And they showed the Birmingham community and the world exactly who was responsible. Within days, arrests began across Birmingham. One by one, the defendants were taken into custody by Birmingham police, 8 people in total. 8 young adults from Birmingham who had made a series of catastrophic decisions that would haunt them and Mahogany's family for the rest of their lives. Birmingham police held a press conference. They described the crime as deplorable and sickening. They called it one of the most heinous acts Birmingham had ever seen, and they made it clear that justice would be pursued with full force through Birmingham's courts. If you're a parent in Birmingham or anywhere else and you're not subscribed to channels that keep you informed about these threats, you're gambling with your family's safety. Don't gamble. Subscribe. The Birmingham community reacted with shock and outrage. How could this happen in Birmingham? How could a group of young people from this city, some of them barely out of high school, commit such a monstrous act? But the evidence was undeniable. The videos told the story. And that story was one of cruelty, betrayal, and murder in Birmingham, Alabama. Mahogany's mother spoke publicly to Birmingham media about her grief, about the unbearable pain of losing her daughter in such a horrific way in her own city, about the trauma of sitting through court hearings in Birmingham, watching evidence, hearing testimony that no parent should ever have to endure. She talked about visiting the site in southwest Birmingham where Mahogany died, about the recurring anguish of knowing exactly where her daughter's life ended on Birmingham streets, about the child who would now grow up in Birmingham without a mother. And she asked a question that echoed through the entire Birmingham community. Why? Why did this happen in Birmingham? Why did a dispute over a stolen gun escalate into torture and murder? Why did 8 people from Birmingham, 8 individuals who could have stopped this at any point, choose to participate instead? There are no easy answers. There's no single explanation that makes sense of such senseless violence in Birmingham or anywhere else. But what is clear is this: Mahogany Jackson deserved better. She deserved friends in Birmingham who would protect her, not harm her. She deserved a life where trust didn't lead to betrayal. She deserved to watch her child grow up in Birmingham, and she deserved justice. Still not subscribed? Then comment below and tell us why. Tell us why staying uninformed is better than protecting your community. We'll wait. The legal process in Birmingham moved swiftly. By late February and early March of 2024, all 8 defendants had been arrested by Birmingham police and charged. Initially, the charges varied in Birmingham's court system. Some faced kidnapping and assault. Others were charged with felony murder. But as the Birmingham investigation continued and more evidence came to light, the charges were upgraded. Capital murder. All 8 defendants in Birmingham. In Alabama, capital murder is the most serious charge the state can bring. It carries 2 possible sentences: life in prison without parole or death. And Birmingham prosecutors made their intentions clear. They were seeking the death penalty for every single defendant. The legal justification was straightforward in Birmingham's courts. Under Alabama law, prosecutors can seek death in cases that are deemed especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. And this Birmingham case, with its hours of recorded torture, its betrayal by trusted friends, its execution-style killing, certainly qualified. Defense attorneys in Birmingham pushed back. They filed motions challenging the capital's stance. They argued about jury requirements, about the defendants' ages, about mitigating factors that should be considered by Birmingham judges. But the Birmingham prosecution held firm. They presented the videos in Jefferson County Court. They detailed the timeline. They showed the jury pool and the Birmingham public exactly what Mahogany had endured. If you think the justice system works on its own, you're wrong. It works when communities stay informed and demand accountability. Subscribe to be part of that accountability. Court testimony in Birmingham revealed the full scope of the horror. Birmingham detectives described what they saw in the footage. They explained how each defendant was identified. They walked through the evidence step by step in Birmingham courtrooms, building an airtight case. The preliminary hearings in Birmingham were brutal. Family members sat in the Jefferson County Courthouse forced to relive Mahogany's final hours. Her mother attended, her grief visible to everyone present in that Birmingham courtroom. News outlets across Birmingham covered every development. Local Birmingham stations, national media coming to Birmingham, true crime podcasts discussing the Birmingham case. The story spread across the country, horrifying audiences everywhere and putting Birmingham in the national spotlight. People in Birmingham and beyond wanted to know, how could this happen? How could a group of young people from Birmingham commit such an act? And perhaps more importantly, what could have prevented it in Birmingham? Some pointed to the stolen gun, the initial grievance that supposedly started the conflict in Birmingham. If that dispute had been resolved differently, would Mahogany still be alive in Birmingham today? Others focused on the group dynamic in Birmingham. How peer pressure and mob mentality can turn individuals into monsters. How each person likely felt emboldened by the presence of others, creating a feedback loop of violence in that Birmingham house. Still others asked about the Birmingham community, about the warning signs that may have been missed, about whether earlier intervention could have stopped the tragedy before it began in Birmingham. Every person who walks past this video without subscribing is saying they don't care enough to learn. Prove us wrong. Hit that button. But all of these questions, important as they are, couldn't change what had happened in Birmingham. Mahogany was gone. Her child was without a mother in Birmingham. Her family was shattered. And 8 young lives from Birmingham were now defined by the worst decision they would ever make. As the case moved toward trial in Birmingham, more details emerged. The grand jury in Jefferson County returned indictments. The death penalty notices were filed by Birmingham prosecutors. Defense teams began preparing their strategies for Birmingham's courts. And through it all, Mahogany's family in Birmingham continued to grieve. Her mother spoke to Birmingham reporters about the ongoing trauma, about how court proceedings in Birmingham forced her to relive the nightmare over and over again. About visiting the site in southwest Birmingham where her daughter died, unable to stay away even though it brought nothing but pain. She talked about Mahogany's child, now growing up in Birmingham without a mother. About the questions that would come as the child got older. About how to explain something so inexplicable that happened in their own city. The Birmingham community rallied around the family. Vigils were held across Birmingham. Memorials were created in Birmingham neighborhoods. People who had never met Mahogany came together in Birmingham to honor her memory and demand justice. Birmingham police leadership emphasized the impact on everyone involved. They talked about the trauma experienced by Birmingham investigators who had to watch the videos, about the emotional toll of working a case this disturbing in Birmingham, about the commitment to seeing it through to the end. The case became a focal point in Birmingham's crime coverage throughout 2024 and into 2025. Every hearing in Birmingham, every motion filed in Birmingham courts, every development was reported, analyzed, discussed across Birmingham and beyond. Because this wasn't just about Mahogany in Birmingham, it was about what her story represented, about the dangers lurking in familiar spaces in Birmingham and everywhere else, about the fragility of trust, about how quickly violence can erupt when the wrong people come together. And it was about accountability in Birmingham, about making sure that those responsible face the full weight of Alabama law. The 8 defendants remained in Birmingham custody, held without bond as the capital case proceeded through Jefferson County. Their arraignments in Birmingham came and went. Pre-trial hearings were scheduled in Birmingham. The legal machinery ground forward, slowly but inevitably. For Mahogany's family in Birmingham, there was no closure. There couldn't be. No verdict in a Birmingham courtroom, no sentence, no amount of justice could bring her back, but there could be accountability. There could be consequences. There could be a public acknowledgement in Birmingham, and beyond that, what happened to Mahogany was wrong, not just legally, but morally, fundamentally, absolutely wrong. And so they waited in Birmingham. They attended hearings, they gave statements. They kept Mahogany's memory alive while Birmingham's legal system did its work. If you still haven't subscribed, we have to ask, what would it take? What victim would matter enough? Comment your answer, we dare you. As of now, the case against Mahogany Jackson's killers is still moving through Birmingham's court system. Capital cases take time, years often, as defense and prosecution prepare for a trial in Birmingham where life and death hang in the balance. The defendants face a long road ahead in Birmingham's Jefferson County courts. If convicted by a Birmingham jury, they could spend the rest of their lives in Alabama prisons, or they could face execution. Either way, their futures are defined by what they did on that February night in Birmingham. But this Birmingham case isn't just about legal outcomes. It's about the broader lessons we can take from Mahogany's tragedy. First, there's the issue of trust and safety, not just in Birmingham but everywhere. Mahogany knew her attackers. She was in a familiar Birmingham space with familiar faces. And that's what makes this case so terrifying, because it shatters the assumption that danger only comes from strangers. The reality is that most violence against women is committed by people they know. Partners, ex-partners, friends, acquaintances. And Mahogany's Birmingham case is a stark reminder of that fact. So what can we learn? How can we protect ourselves and the people we love in Birmingham and beyond? If you care about protecting your loved ones, subscribe now. Because the next story we cover could save someone you know. One crucial step is communication. Mahogany did reach out. She texted her mother from that Birmingham location. She shared her location. She asked for help, and that information became vital to the Birmingham investigation. If you ever find yourself in a situation that feels wrong, even if you're with people you know in Birmingham or anywhere else, reach out, text someone, share your location. Set up check-ins with trusted friends or family members. Use the safety features on your phone. And if you receive a message like the one Mahogany sent from Birmingham, take it seriously. Call the police immediately, whether it's Birmingham police or anywhere else. Provide them with all the information you have. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Minutes can make the difference between life and death. Technology can be a lifeline. Most smartphones today have emergency features that can alert authorities and share your location with trusted contacts instantly. Learn how to use them. Teach your children, your friends, your family members. Make it second nature, like knowing where the fire exits are. In Birmingham and across the country, emergency services are equipped to respond to location data quickly. But they can only help if they know where you are and what's happening. Mahogany understood this. She did everything right in those final hours. She reached out. She shared her location. She told her mother exactly what was happening. The tragedy is that time ran out before help could arrive at that Birmingham location. There's also the issue of group violence and mob mentality, something Birmingham saw firsthand in this case. 8 people were involved in this crime. 8 individuals who each made a choice to participate, to watch, or to stay silent in that Birmingham house. It's easy to think that we would never do something like that. That we would be the one to speak up, to intervene, to call for help. But research shows that group dynamics can be powerful. That people are more likely to commit violence when they're part of a group. That the presence of others can make individuals feel less personally responsible for their actions. Psychologists call this diffusion of responsibility. When multiple people witness something wrong, each person assumes someone else will act, and so no one does. Everyone becomes a bystander, and the victim suffers while the crowd watches. In Mahogany's case in Birmingham, 8 people had 8 separate opportunities to stop what was happening. 8 chances to say no. 8 moments when someone could have walked away, called the police, or done anything to intervene, but none of them did. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where a group is doing something wrong, whether in Birmingham or anywhere else, speak up, walk away, call someone. Don't let peer pressure or group mentality pull you into something you'll regret forever. And if you see warning signs in your community, escalating conflicts, threats, violence, report it to Birmingham police or your local authorities. Anonymous tip lines exist for a reason. Early intervention can prevent tragedies like what happened to Mahogany in Birmingham. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to testify in court. You just have to make that call. That one action could save a life. Still scrolling without subscribing? That's a choice too. A choice to stay uninformed. A choice to stay vulnerable. Make a different choice. There's also the question of how disputes escalate. This Birmingham case allegedly started with a stolen gun, a grievance. A conflict that, in a different context, might have been resolved peacefully. Think about that for a moment. A stolen gun. Something that could have been reported to Birmingham police. Something that could have been handled through proper channels. Instead, it became the spark that ignited a night of torture and murder. But when weapons are involved, when emotions run high, when the wrong people are in the room, whether in Birmingham or anywhere else, conflicts can explode into violence. We can teach our children about healthy relationships, about recognizing red flags, about the importance of boundaries and respect. We can model those behaviors ourselves in our own lives, in our own Birmingham neighborhoods and beyond. We can support victims. We can believe them when they say they're in danger. We can act quickly when someone reaches out for help, the way Mahogany reached out from that Birmingham location. And we can hold perpetrators accountable. We can demand justice. We can refuse to let cases like this fade from memory after the news cycle moves on. Mahogany's child will grow up in Birmingham without a mother. Her family will carry this grief forever. And 8 young people from Birmingham will spend the rest of their lives defined by the worst thing they ever did. None of that can be undone. The clock can't be turned back to that February night in Birmingham. Mahogany can't be brought back to her baby, to her mother, to the life she was building. But we can learn from it. We can do better. We can make sure that Mahogany's story saves lives instead of just breaking hearts. We can make sure that the next young mother who feels unsafe has someone to turn to. That the next person who receives a desperate text acts immediately. That the next group of friends chooses intervention over participation. That's Mahogany's legacy. That's what Birmingham, and the rest of us, can take from this tragedy. Not just sadness, not just outrage, but action, change, protection, prevention. Because Mahogany Jackson's story doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something better, something safer, something that honors her memory by protecting others. That's why we tell these stories. That's why we ask you to subscribe. Not for views, not for likes, but because staying informed saves lives. Mahogany Jackson was 20 years old when she died on a Birmingham roadside. She was a mother, a daughter, a young woman from Birmingham with dreams and fears and a whole life ahead of her. She trusted the wrong people in Birmingham. She found herself in a situation that escalated beyond her control. And in her final moments in Birmingham, she fought to survive. She reached out for help. She did everything she could. But it wasn't enough. Her story from Birmingham is a reminder that danger doesn't always come from strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes it comes from familiar faces in familiar places. Sometimes the people we trust are the people who hurt us most. And that's what makes cases like Mahogany's Birmingham tragedy so devastating. Because they force us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that violence can erupt anywhere, anytime, from anyone. But Mahogany's story is also a reminder of something else. The importance of speaking up. She texted her mother from that Birmingham location. She shared her location. She asked for help. And while that help came too late for Mahogany, her actions provided Birmingham investigators with the information they needed to solve her case and bring her killers to justice. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your last chance to prove you care, to prove you're listening, to prove Mahogany's death in Birmingham means something to you. So, if there's one thing you take away from this Birmingham story, let it be this. Trust your instincts. Reach out when something feels wrong. Share your location. Set up check-ins. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And if someone reaches out to you, believe them. Act quickly. Call the police. Provide them with everything they need to respond, whether it's Birmingham police or anywhere else. Because in situations like Mahogany's, every second counts. Her family in Birmingham is still grieving. Her child is growing up in Birmingham without a mother. Her community is still processing the horror of what happened in their city. But her story doesn't end with her death on a Birmingham road. It continues in the lessons we learn, the actions we take, the lives we protect. And if you still won't subscribe after everything you just heard about Mahogany from Birmingham, then tell us why in the comments. Tell us why her story doesn't matter. Tell us why you think you're immune. Because silence protects no one, not in Birmingham, not anywhere. Rest in peace, Mahogany Jackson. Your life in Birmingham mattered, your story matters, and we won't forget you. If this Birmingham story affected you, please share it. Talk about it. Use it as a reminder to look out for each other, to take safety seriously, to speak up when something feels wrong. Because the best way to honor Mahogany's memory is to make sure her Birmingham tragedy isn't repeated. Subscribe now, stay safe, and look out for each other. Because the next story we tell could be about someone you love. Don't let it be.